Hello everyone, this is Beyond Boundaries. Welcome to the show. We have Mrs. Pooja Bose, Principal of Pastek World School. Welcome to the show.
Hello everyone, I am Pooja Bose and it's a pleasure to be on this interview. I look forward to answering all your questions.
You have such a vast experience from building strong foundational management for the schools, training teachers and shaping minds for the future. So how has been your journey throughout? Can you tell us in brief something about it?
My journey started in the year 1994 and I started my role as a teacher. As a primary teacher. Fortunately, I have had the fortune or opportunity to move a lot in India, work in different schools, because of which I was able to get a taste of different schools and different setups. So what I realized that schools almost everywhere are almost the same, barring a few challenges which different states, different socio-cultural settings pose towards schools. And while I was working in different schools, I also realized most schools struggle with the same kind of challenges. They have the same strength, the strength being the teachers, the strength being the youth, the youngsters, the students. So schools have resources. In our country, we have to pay more heed, more attention towards the human resource, which is very motivated. But we have to invest more in human resource, which will bring out the best in different schools.
In today's world, because of different jobs and places, a lot of people are moving around the country. They are going from Hyderabad to Bangalore to Pune. So how do you think this affects the new kids which are coming with such parents who are moving around the cities? And what new things you feel that those kids need to be taken care of?
On the other hand, I think traveling and moving around in different cities is an opportunity. It is a very enriching experience. If you talk about my own children, we were moving from one city to the other almost every 2 or 3 years. It teaches a lot of adaptability to the kids. It's an enriching experience. They develop a lot of resilience. They also develop traits to meet new people, interact with strangers, to adapt, and also to make a mark in the schools, in the settings where they go to. Over a period of time, as they grow, this becomes their quality, this becomes their strength. So when people travel from one school to the other or one city to the other, there's a lot of adaptation which happens. And adaptation is always a good quality. And as you know that the one who adapts quicker has greater chances of survival as compared to others. I think movement and getting out of your comfort zone is a good thing.
If I add on a bit on this, in our days, what happens is generally we spend, most of our classes in a single school and we build a strong relationship with that particular teacher. How do you think when you move around the city as a teacher, so that kind of relationship is being built, or how has it been affected or been through your journey?
The relationships do get built, and like any other relationship, 90% of the people whom you meet out of 100, they do not want to carry on with the relationships. It's only 10% people who want to continue to nurture or preserve a particular relationship. The same is the formula with the teacher and student relationship. I know of students whom we have mentored or taught maybe 10 to 15 years ago, and they're still in touch with me. I don't think being in touch is a challenge in the world of social media today, and students always make it a point to reach out, provided they want to reach out. And they do make phone calls, they will connect over the social media sites. And I think the relationships are preserved this way. The ones which don't want to be preserved, which want to kind of fade out with the time, they fade out any which way. The bond of a teacher and a student is not based on any prior expectation. The teacher always wants that at that particular moment when she or he is teaching in a class, wants to give the best to the student. Such has been the intent of me as a teacher also, and I think that has worked very well for me.
I learned that a lot of teachers are very, new teachers which are coming up. They are emotionally getting connected with the kids a lot. But unfortunately, as the time demands, they have to move to another city because of a lot of reasons. So any suggestion or thing you can tell them, like how they can cope up with, moving environment and changing generations? Because the kind of emotional attachment they carry, maybe the other kids and today's generation don't have, and they are moving around also. So what do you think a teacher or these new teachers can do?
Having attachments is good, but sticking on to those attachments is not good. Be it a teacher or a professional, you could be an IT professional, you could be a teacher, you could be a bureaucrat, you could be in IAS, ICS, or you could be a soldier. You have to move from one place to the other. That's the very nature of these jobs. You have to be attached with detachment, because too much of attachment in your professional world, in your professional field, will lead to a scenario where you get nervous moving on and moving forward. I think as an individual, I have always been very excited about moving to a new place. And I have always looked forward to a new setting, a new posting, a new school, a new job. I think that excitement helped me get energized with my new assignments, and it has always worked well. The idea is to enjoy moving and relishing different fields and different environments. Once you start doing that and once you have that mindset, I think it will be a fun ride for you.
How have you succeeded with such an ease in aligning the academic and institutional visions which you and the management carries for the students, while keeping in mind that you have to collaborate with teachers, with administrative staff, and you have to manage everyone together? So how with such an ease you are able to, move this, take this forward?
It wasn't easy. Like I told you that I have been a teacher. I have risen through the ranks. It hasn't been that I straight away took the chair of a principal. Fortunately for me, I have done the role of teacher as a primary level, as a TGT, as a PGT. I have also worked in different departments like the examination department, the timetable department, and been a coordinator. So I know what it is to be in each role. I know the challenges. I know the way to move, navigate your way in your professional settings. So it's an art. It doesn't come automatically. It has to be nurtured. It has to be more of a hands-on learning. At least for me, it was more of hands-on learning. While I was working, I was learning. In our country, we don't have any training school for principals. Okay, you don't have any college where you train principals. So over your professional journey, you learn how to be a leader. To be a leader anyway, it demands that you have to balance so many forces around you. You have to coordinate amicably. In the modern times, people don't just accept a leader as a leader till they are convinced that this person deserves to be one. Same was the case with me. I had to make my place in any professional settings. I had to prove myself in different schools. I think I was able to do that. I was blessed that I had the ability to reflect a lot on where I was going wrong also. When you start the role of a principal or an administrator, there are a lot of mistakes that you make. Good part is that you have to learn from those mistakes. If you continue to believe that whatever you are saying or whatever you are doing is the best thing around, there is the problem which many leaders tend to have, that they feel self-pompous. I was not like that. I was able to reflect a lot and improve on my skills. My own skills changed over a period of time. So the balancing act, as you rightly put, is there. It's not easy, it is difficult, but one has to learn and do it.
And grow out of it. You have a lot of different experiences throughout your journey. What do you feel are the few of the highlighting challenges you have? You must have not expected many of those, but few highlighted ones, if you could tell us, and how you overcome those, how those have helped the journey which you are going through right now.
Resources everywhere are a limiting factor. Your acumen lies in making the most out of the resources that you have. Now, those resources could be human, time, financial, or even the infrastructure. Not everywhere that I worked that I had the best of infrastructure. There were sometimes challenges of weather. When I was working in northeastern India, the weather was a big challenge. It used to rain almost 9 months in a year. Many a times the schools were closed because of rain. I'm talking about times when we never had online education also. So you can well imagine the kind of damage that, the weather disturbances had on the running a smooth curriculum itself was a huge challenge. See why I'm saying this right now. We are sitting in Delhi NCR. We have the best of everything.
Absolutely.
We have great classrooms, ample financial resources. We have good quality teachers. I want to draw your attention to 75% of our country is not in tier A towns. The smaller towns of our country also have schools. Those schools struggle with good quality teachers, good settings in school. They don't even have a playground. They don't even have toilets, enough toilets for boys and girls. Sometimes the books don't reach on time. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's snowing. So, education, when we talk about equal opportunities for education, it's not there. There are children who struggle with such limiting factors. Yet, when children from these smaller towns, they do well in their entrance exams, in their IAS exam or UPSC or IITs or medicine, it's a great thing. We must give opportunities to these children who don't even have good tutors or coach to prepare them for entrance exams. We must think about them also. Here, we are dealing with abundance. Even this is abundance. Imagine a child who's sitting in a very small town in Kashmir. What kind of disturbances that child would be feeling? There are some political disturbances, sometimes military disturbances, sometimes weather-related disturbances. I had visited a school in Kargil. I want to take this opportunity to talk to you about that school. When my husband was posted in Kargil, I visited a KV, Central School in Kargil. I met the principal and the principal said that meet the class 12th students. They don't have an English teacher since past 8 months. When I entered their class, they said that, ma'am, we are doing the whole course ourselves, but these few poems we are not able to understand. Neither our parents can teach us English. We don't have teachers to teach us English. How will we appear for the exam? This is the reality. Because nobody wants to get posted to a disturbed area. So how do those students study? So I think that we should also think about those vast majority of students who are in those cities and towns. Right now, we are probably focusing on the children who have abundance and who have educated parents. They are in good schools, but what about them?
As you mentioned that most of the countries, unfortunately, not having that privilege of having abundance, having education and those kind of resources, technology. If someone is going forward and building their own management or starting their own teaching place or something, or becoming a teacher, what would be your suggestion or thing you would like tell others that they can do this or particular thing which will slowly and steadily start bringing at least the educational basic changes?
Oh, I have a lot to say about this. When you talk about teachers, when we open a post for a teacher, I get so many applications. Those candidates are full of degrees and certificates. When you see the documents, you feel that this person must be greatly endowed with talent and ability. But when you talk to the person, one realizes that the quality of a teacher, even as simple as the subject knowledge or the content knowledge, is missing. Whenever you are studying something, whenever you are doing your B.Ed, whenever you are doing your bachelor's or your master's, first of all, have a learner mindset. Have the desire or the intent to learn what you are wanting to learn, what you are claiming to be. There are people who have done their B.Eds, but they have no knowledge about education. They don't know much about their own subject. They have not read enough. They do not go deeper into the why and how of phenomenons, whatever their subject is. If you are a social study teacher, you must read about current affairs, you must know about geography, you must know about history. You should go beyond the domain of your syllabus. It is not enough that you open a book, the textbook, and start teaching in the class. That's not your role as a teacher. Your role as a teacher is to develop in the students a hunger or a desire to learn. For that, you yourself have to be hungry to learn. So the teachers themselves have to, first of all, enrich themselves if they claim to be educationists. I think that is slowly diminishing. I don't see so many teachers who are really excited or wanting to enhance their own capacities as teachers. So that is my message, that please, when you're doing your B.Ed, read through the syllabus, read through the content of your books, understand what you're going to do. You are ultimately responsible for those students who are sitting in the classrooms and who are looking up to you to deliver that knowledge. So you have to have that responsibility that whatever you give, you should give them the best, because you are nurturing the future of this country. You cannot dilute your position there.
Government has started focusing now on extracurricular activities and holistic development and those kind of things. Still, there is a lot of competitive mind and still which used to exist in older times. People say that it has gone, but it hasn't gone really. Even today, marks are important, that race is important, and theoretical things are still, being judged to get an admission to top institute. What do you think can be done by the teachers or should do that can bring a little bit about a change?
In this aspect, I don't think competition is bad. I don't think theory is also bad. Everything is good in its rightful place and rightful amount. See, we are in a populated country. Obviously, we don't have abundance of seats in colleges. We don't have, abundance of finances. Hence, we struggle with numbers. Whenever we have to choose people, whenever we have to filter out individuals for a particular position or a particular seat, naturally there will be competition. That's the reality of our lives. So we have to teach our students also to compete. How do you compete? What is healthy competition? That is something which needs to go alongside. You cannot be a shark. You cannot think that if I eat others, I'm going to outshine others. You have to outshine others with your own ability. You have to be better than the rest of them and outshine them, rather than, killing competition or, trying to subdue others. You can't scream and shout and dampen the voices around you. I think what you should speak should be well-meaning, should make sense, and you should genuinely be better than the others. And you will be able to make a mark for yourself. I think that is what we need to teach our kids. We are struggling with too much of theory, too much of content. But I think the greater struggle is in the fact that we are unable to find joy in learning that content, because the teachers who are teaching those things themselves don't feel joyful enough, happy enough to teach it. So they also do it as a matter of factly, as a matter of routine. That lack of passion is also transmitted to the students. When you find a teacher who has a spring in her feet and who enters the class with cheer and who's able to bring that joy and passion and excitement in the classroom when she's teaching a topic, it automatically comes in the students. Students are very fertile. They are like sponges. They will absorb whatever kind of things you teach them. So I think that needs to be just more prevalent amongst the teachers. We are fortunate that the government is giving us more and more freedom. Unlike previously, when this much syllabus has to be taught, this has to be done, there's so many options that are coming in the question paper. So nowhere is it written that you have to do all the chapters. You have to pick and choose whatever you want to do, whatever clicks well with you, whatever you connect better with. So do that. And students also have a lot of choice, lot of options. We are not so stringent now about marks. We are discouraging publicizing he's the topper, she's the topper, this much percentage, 0.001 percentage to the nth value we have to post in the public domain. All that is going slowly and steadily. So it's a good time to be. But the thing is that we have to change with the changing times, and we have to enjoy being in the current moment.
So recently, in our times, 3 Idiots came in, and it has a lot of influence among the students. Few months back, October, a movie by the name 12th Fail came in, which talked about the struggles of becoming a IAS officer and the competition the person goes through. In the similar month, a similar pattern of same movie came, All India Rank. It also talked about the competition and the pressure students go through. Both the writers of such movies had a similar suggestion. In one of the interviews, they mentioned that we have a competition where we select a few thousand students out of lakhs in premium institutes. Why don't we open premium institutes for everyone? Why don't we provide that kind of quality education to everyone? Like, why we are restricting it to few students? Just based on a competition. Like, we should have those kind of infrastructure, teachers in every colleges, in every institution. Why such thing has never been thought upon, or how it will impact the younger minds which are coming up.
What is premium?
Premium means IIT, IIM, where
So why are they premium?
Maybe because people have a trust that what they teach is valuable and it will place me somewhere. It will give me a good.
That's not what defines something which is premium. A premium academic institution is one which has a faculty which is highly driven, focused, and clear about their goals. I have previously also mentioned that we struggle to find a good quality teaching faculty, even in a place like schools. So you can well imagine the kind of challenge IITs and IIMs are facing to get the right kind of professors and lecturers in their institutions. So they are rare. A rarest of rare professor or a teacher will have only 24 hours to teach, not more than that in a given day. So you can't have a classroom filled with all sorts of students, because students also have to understand what the teacher is saying and share the teacher's enthusiasm on an equal platform as far as the intellectual ability is concerned. So not everybody has the same ability, not everybody has the same goal also. Some students have the goal of being a journalist, for example. That person need not come to IIM at all. Acumen of different person has to match with the institution where they go. And of course, IIM and IITs have limited seats because they want to develop quality. They want to develop excellence. To develop excellence, you have to focus on every student who comes under the roof of these premier institutions. Therefore, it is for the classes, it's not for the masses.
Do you think technology helps building more curiosity among the students? And is it helping the students to become more curious and explore?
By nature, every child is curious. Technology or no technology, every child is curious to learn and know and explore. Great part about technology is explorative quality in a child can find answers easily. And one thing can lead to the other. When you are curious, you will Google some information and you will get it, and then you want to know more and you want to know more. So curiosity is in fact fueled by technology. It is not killed by technology. Lack of avenues to find answers to would certainly lead to some sort of disheartenment, or they feel that there is no way in which they will be able to find answers to their questions, and slowly the questions fade away or die. So technology is a good medium, a good tool, a good instrument to kindle curiosity and maybe have advanced curiosity amongst the students, yes.
But ma'am, like technology exposes the students vast information and everything. So do you think that thing hampers creativity and innovation and uniqueness in people, in children especially. Instead of thinking something new or create something new, we rather focus. We think that, okay, we have 2-3 things, we will mix those and create our. Instead of, really thinking and innovating.
Creativity is an intrinsic quality. People who believe in cutting and copying and pasting don't want to be creative. That's why they are doing it. For people who want to be creative, they would never ever be satisfied with a copy paste kind of a product. Let me give you an example.
Yes,
if I'm a writer and I want to write on the way people interview, there'll be hundreds of answers to this question on internet. I can also put this question on ChatGPT and I'll get an answer. But is that my answer? Am I happy with that answer? That is a very personal question. I would probably want to take 2% or 3% from what I read and make my own, give my own opinion about it. I can take 10% of it, I can take 50% of it, I can copy paste the whole thing. That's a very personal value which I have. We still have creative people around us. We still have creative musicians, we have artists, we have speakers, teachers. There is no dearth of creative people. The people who are not so creative, the people who lack the ability to innovate or create things on their own, they will always resort to or take help from what others are doing. But ultimately, their ability or their acumen will be recognized. If you have it in you to create something new, it will be recognized and you will be spotted in the crowd. There's no stopping you if you want to.
In brief, I also wanted to know what is really your opinion being a new age parent, because we are also everyone is stepping into new adulthood.
By virtue of my profession, I interact with a lot of parents. Unlike previous times when parenting was taught in the family, you had role models within your family to understand how a mother should behave or how a father should behave. And the child had other people to run to in case there was a need for help if the parents are working or unavailable. So there was the presence of uncles or aunts or grandparents. Slowly the joint family system changed to just maybe the grandparents and the parents in the household. Now we are in an age where mostly a house is comprising of mother, father and child. And that too, if both the parents are working, the child feels very, child has no one else to run to except the parents. Now the parents are also struggling with time, resources, and also they don't have enough experience to deal with the challenges of being a parent. It's often seen that because of lack of any previous model, the parents don't know what it is to give to the child. What is the best thing to give to the child? Many parents feel that because they are not having enough time, to compensate for that, they give too many comforts or too many material resources to the children. Some of them even become highly protective. They have some unrealistic expectations from the society or from the school, and they kind of want to keep their child in a cocooned environment. This certainly leads to the child becoming very, very weak or lack of resilience in the child. So the children, we as parents or as teachers, we have to make our children strong and tough and resilient. To do that, they have to face certain hardships. If a child will not run in an open field in the ground, get his hands dirty, or fall down while playing sports, the child will never know what it is to get hurt or what to get, a scratch. So the first time a child will get hurt probably will be a time when there are not enough parents or helpers around the child to support the situation, and the child will not be able to handle it himself or herself. So in school settings or in household settings, till the children are with you, you have to make them strong enough to deal with the challenges of the world around them. For that, you have to expose them to those challenges. There's no other way. You have to get into the water to swim, right? So you cannot theoretically swim, or you cannot theoretically drive a car. You have to drive a car to learn to drive. So for that, you have to take risks, you have to take challenges. So that's my message for the parents, that allow your children to be. Do not get overprotective about them.
You have been involved in a lot of international projects and collaborated with schools in Korea, in Japan, and worked with British Council and those kind of esteemed organizations and places. So I wanted to know, how has such international exposure enriched your experience as an educator, and what do you think you have learned or saw there or observed, which is beneficial for our school environment and our children, and what we can learn from those kind of places and institutions?
I'll tell you one very important difference which a child from other countries has as compared to an Indian child. Most of the children across the globe are very independent thinkers. They are allowed to make their own decisions. They are given the charge of thinking about their lives and handling their lives at a very early age. That makes them more capable as adults. I'm not saying that internationally, if you look at children from other countries, they are better as adults. Our children, of course, have the good traits of respecting seniors, giving due regard to the parents, to the grandparents in the family. Our values as family, as a family person, or a kid in the family are certainly much better. But when it comes to making independent decisions, we struggle. We look up to other people to decide for ourselves. We don't even have enough exposure as children to make those informed decisions. Something which we should learn from these kids is their ability to have more faith in themselves and confidence in their thoughts, so that they can decide for themselves. So I think that is one thing which most of the students can develop.
Do you see that outside also, are the kids getting so much distracted so easily with all those
Yes.
gadgets and
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Do you think while coping up, are the international methods similar or different, or depends on each culture and each country?
No, it's the same struggle. The challenges of having too many gadgets with the kids is everywhere. And it has led to distractions. It has led to addictions of mobile and internet also. It is very much there in Western countries. It has seeped into Asian countries also. Dealing with them is also a struggle for the adults. So I think it's a universal phenomena.
Earning methods have come up because of maybe new technologies which used to be a distraction in some days, like YouTube or short form videos were a distraction in some days, but now they are one of the biggest money making things. So do you think in that sense, if someone is, where do you draw that fine line that your kid doesn't cross the line and become a distractor, and just use that medium for a resourceful way or something? In a resourceful way.
You don't draw a line. You actually watch your own self. As a mother or a father, how much time am I spending on social media? Children only watch what is going on around them. To my view, a lot of family members are also indulging in, their time is mostly spent on Instagram or on social media. So the child is only watching and imbibing the same set of habits. YouTube and other such channels are also learning resource. So many DIY channels are there. You just log on to them and learn so many things. It's actually the kind of mindset that you develop in a child. You can use technology, like I said, for your own advantage. You can use technology to just continuously remain in a virtual world, oblivious to the reality around you. So it is really your decision as a parent, what kind of environment you want to give to the child. One thing is very, very sure and clear, that technology is going to enter your lives. So you have to be a responsible individual and a responsible adult. You should have filters everywhere in life also, and on your laptop also. And you should also, till your child is young, you should check the history of the surfing, the browsing history. I think that these are ways in which you can check what is going on and educate them about cyber crimes, educate them about cyber etiquettes.
Are you think these are the new things which schools have started, including in their curriculum? Because in our days, like being a 90s kid, I don't think I ever talked about cybersecurity or anything in my school. But
Experience teaches you many things, and we have had experiences of such breach of trust, and we've had experiences, and we have risen to those challenges, and we have prepared ourselves.
So, as we are going towards conclusion part, I wanted to know, as an adult, you have gone through so many things, seen so many events, and have observed so many things around you. What do you think one thing you have learned so far which will resonate with the parents as well as any adult which would, hear you out right now and, have any inspiration or anything which they can learn from it? Like any one thing which you would like to share with us?
Just enjoy the journey. We are in this amazing sector of education. Education is a field which is very fertile, which has the capacity to grow, to expand to phenomenal limits, heights. And one needs to just understand the tremendous responsibility one has on him or her and make the most out of it. As adults, we do understand that we are living in very volatile times. We have so much happening on the geopolitical front. Climate is changing. The world economics is changing. So we really don't have much idea about how the world is going to look like 10 years from now. All we can do right now is to prepare our children for this big change, prepare them, equip them with skills, with abilities. And I think that's the job of adults of today. Beyond that, I don't think we should think of controlling their lives much, because they are more smart than what we were at their age. So we have to appreciate that, and they know more. Let's understand that we may be more experienced, but in terms of knowledge, in terms of their awareness about the world around them, they know much more than what we did at their age. So we've got to grant them that.
And ma'am, just to add on a slide on this, due to new industries and the world is getting mechanical, as I read through a lot of articles, and the emotions and empathy, if I talk about in particular, is losing in people. So what do you think the young generation can learn or, become better at, so that they don't lose that empathy or emotion which is getting away as we are moving towards more nuclear families, more nuclear environment where people are getting isolated and preferring single life? And because all professional life, college life, everything is dependent on how a personality is being shaped. So what do you think will keep them have that empathy throughout their life and they don't lose it with the technology?
Schools have a big role to play in this. Parents also have a huge role to play in this. As a school head, I think we give a lot of exposure to them in terms of, like you said, that These are the things which are slowly diminishing from the world around them. So making them aware that this is a value which you need to have, which you need to possess as a human being. Having respect for other human beings, give other human beings a dignity, a regard, irrespective of how rich or poor they are. We have to demonstrate those qualities as adults in front of them, and then talk to them about the presence of these traits to make them a better human being. I think a lot of discussions and conversations and projects centering around these values need to be taken up by schools. Because like you rightly said, the mechanization of the world around is such that we're becoming more capitalistic. We are being more commercial. Everything is commercial. So the respect for human to human connect is slowly going down. But I think we need to continue to promote it, talk about it, value it, reward people who have good interpersonal skills. Also, we should reward them. No, we should popularize people for these skills, not just somebody who scored, say, 99%, but also somebody who's been most helpful. Give that person equal regard or equal merit. I think when we start doing these things, people will change their viewpoint and people will start to understand the importance of these traits also, because that's what makes the world more beautiful, right?
Absolutely. That is why I also always focus on holistic development. I feel that people should always have their empathy in them. So, ma'am, coming to our concluding segment, it's a slight rapid fire round kind of thing. And I will just mention something, and whatever first memory, opinion, anything you would like to share regarding that word, you can just pop it up. Whatever comes first to your mind. Okay, ma'am? So we'll start with army schools.
Good schools, good settings for children of defense personnel.
Storybooks.
Interesting.
Novels.
Deep.
Young new age parents.
Impatient.
Careers.
Exciting.
Doordarshan television.
A thing of the past.
Nice. Music.
Soothing.
Okay. Your favorite food?
Anything which is well prepared and laid out well.
Okay. Any particular cuisine you love?
All cuisines. Yeah.
Your favorite holiday place? Summer vacations are coming up.
I want to go to New Zealand.
New Zealand. Nice. Your favorite sport?
Lawn tennis.
Lawn tennis. Very nice. So this is end to our rapid fire round. And thank you so much for taking out our time. And before leaving, any final words or conclusion you would like to say, suggest, or anything you would like to share?
Oh, thank you for this interview. It was fun. It was like a rediscovery of my own self. So thank you for that.
I had an immense pleasure and such a nice time talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.